Senate Bill 25-003 has quietly been put back on the calendar for consideration at the Colorado House of Representatives tomorrow, March 11th, and is scheduled to be heard upon adjournment. The Colorado General Assembly has already passed legislation that inhibits your constitutional rights. And beyond 25-003 on the calendar, even more legislation designed to chip away at those rights is on the horizon. In this episode, Sheriff Mikesell and Commander Bonalik sit down with Colorado Federal Firearms Licensee Association founder Sean Steele to discuss what this legislation means to law-abiding firearm owners, small businesses, and even law enforcement.
Hi again, I'm Sheriff Jason Mikesell with the Teller County Sheriff's Office, and today I have Sean Steele with me and Commander Sven Bonalik, and we did a piece on Senate Bill 003, which is going to be going up to the House tomorrow in committee, and we'll be up there fighting it. But one of the other issues too is we have some other bills that are kind of interesting on how they're approaching the Second Amendment, and then also the firearm issues across Colorado and the dealing of firearms or selling of firearms throughout Colorado. And that's Senate Bill 25-158. So this is also a Senate bill. So Sean, can you kind of tell the folks in Teller County and out there in YouTube land who you represent and what you're doing?
Yes, thank you, sir. So my name is Sean Steele. I represent the Colorado FFL Firearms Licensee Association. This is a 501c6 trade organization that is designed to provide advocacy, information, compliance support, negotiated rates on services for the federal firearms licensees of the state, as well as lobbying and potential litigation to help support our mission, which is safe and secure and responsible business practices that allow people to deal within the Second Amendment space.
And I think it's important for Sean to come in today because one of the issues that we're seeing is that it's not just an assault on the Second Amendment and your rights to own firearms, but it's also really an assault being done by the same people, because this bill is also being done by Sullivan and Gonzalez, that is trying to destroy the right of businesses to be able to sell and function firearms. And really, that's just as bad really as taking away the ownership rights, because it's going to be hard to get anything in Colorado if these bills go through the way they're written. So 003 and this 25-158 are both really detrimental to Colorado, the economy, but the second piece, this is going to put a lot of businesses out of business here in Colorado. And it's concerning to me on what they're trying to do with the gun regulations for law enforcement to purchase firearms also in the state, and really taking it away from us to be able to issue firearms. And then how do we deal with weapons that are in our inventory that they now want destroyed and us to make licensing for destruction? Senate Bill 25-158 also deals with the fact on how we would acquire weapons in Colorado and making it very cost preventive for us to even do that. So I don't even know how we supply our own people with firearms after these laws go into place, and or ammunition. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So I wanted Sven to come back, because he has a wide breadth of knowledge on these things, and Sean from really the dealer side as to how this is going to affect them. So Sven, you want to talk a little bit about these bills?
I think everybody knows my opinion on 003 and kind of where we stand. We clearly think it's a violation of our Second Amendment, and I think it's overreach from the government, and certainly it's not something that we're in full opposition of. It's not at all in any way, shape, or form legal as far as I'm concerned. It isn't following the heart of our Constitution and the Constitution of the United States. Then I think from this particular point forward, like we always have been, we will be in full opposition to that. In 158, that's a little bit more concerning as well in terms of, from the law enforcement perspective, that makes it very difficult for us to be able to obtain and procure equipment that we need in order to provide the protections to our public and our residents that we're going to need to do in case something bad happens. I procure all the weaponry for the sheriff's office based on how this law is written, and if it were to go into effect, would make my job damn near impossible. I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't be able to get enough weaponry in to be able to outfit our personnel, to be able to protect our citizens. And if I had any sort of surplus in order to replace that weaponry, whether it's damaged, whether it's taken into evidence, because an officer was involved in shooting, by this law, effectively, I would have to destroy it. I would not be allowed to have any surplus. Never minding, this also includes any accessories that are attached to that weapon, not to include a cleaning kit. It seems a little ridiculous to me, but unfortunately, that's just the reality of it.
Well, it means holsters,
Yeah,
optics,
everything.
cleaning
Yeah.
kits, anything
Lights.
to do with a weapon. We would now have to go through a government procuring system. But here's what really concerns me. In Colorado, a sheriff is elected by the people for the constituents of a county. At this point, it's taking all the power away from us to, as a county, to be able to service our own equipment. The state would force us to destroy county equipment, which is paid for by taxpayers. The other piece of that, it gives all the authority to the state attorney general, which I find very interesting on all these laws, that every time I turn around, they want to take away authority from the local law enforcement, local district attorney's office, local agencies to give to the state attorney general. Really, that is a big issue, because the state attorney general didn't used to have authority over us to the degree he thinks he does now. The other issue is you have a state attorney general that believes he is the top law enforcement officer in the state of Colorado, right? Well, the problem is that in every county, a sheriff is the top law enforcement officer. Now, by these means, they're putting into more effect where the state attorney general has authority over everyone in every county. That is a problem, I think, because under state constitution, there was not supposed to be a state policing system. And now it's becoming a state policing system, and it's removing your local officials from that authority. So really what we're wanting to do is put more authority back into your local communities, like it's always been. But I think that's one of the problems with these bills, is it's taking the fiscal impacts away from, or it's taking any fiscal issues and really removing it from local dealers, local counties, and really taking it, and the state's now got control through an attorney general. So that is one of the biggest problems I see.
But I think what's sad is not only in 003 they're attacking the citizens of this state, but now with 158 they're attacking law enforcement and dealers. I mean, they're making it to a point where it becomes extremely difficult for a dealer to be able to just conduct and perform business in order for them to be able to survive. But the things that the government's putting in place requires them to have to jump through a bunch of loopholes, or not loopholes, but hurdles, in order for them to be even able to sell a firearm to a government agency. And I'll let Sean speak to that. But I'll tell you, Sean, having talked to you prior to this, it was informative, and I think the CFFLA is something that is interesting to me, given that I'm a dealer. And this is the first time I've ever heard of it. So,
Well, we're trying to get the word out. So far, we have over 130 represented FFLs. We haven't taken any money from anybody. We have taken some donations to help get stuff funded. But at the end of the day, this is our response to what the state is up to. I call it calculated indifference in a lot of situations. You know, I can't say for certain what a politician is thinking when they're putting something like this together. However, just like when you're investigating a crime, you've got a lot of evidentiary things stacking up. You know, when you look at the timing of these bills, the structure of these bills, they couldn't pass one bill that had everything they want to do in it, so they're chipping away. It just seems like they're treating it with a much more aggressive timeline, and I think that, and I could speculate that may have something to do with everything happening at the top level of the U.S. government at this point, where there's the USAID getting kicked out, or the Act Blue guys getting disintegrated, all this information showing all this money has been traveling in this massive spider web of tax dollars being used to fund gun control. There's a lot to that, and I don't want to get too far into a conspiracy side of things, but it seems like a pretty good playbook. Now, as far as the state is concerned, 003 is the worst piece of gun control legislation that's ever been attempted in any state that I can think of. The thing that we have to remember is that this is but one part of this. Sure, that may be the main course, but you have a lot of other side dishes that they're working on, like the dealer permitting bill, which happened not too long ago, the 6.5 excise tax, all that's currently in effect. And then you've got your 25-158, the ammo bill. There's a lot that's happening.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Anytime I see a bill come across my desk now that has Sullivan, Gonzalez, Froelich, or Brown involved in it, out of the Denver legislature, it's a serious issue. It always has something to do with firearms or law enforcement, and really it's a destruction of both of those groups, firearm ownership by individuals and usually in law enforcement. And it's funny, I've sat through multiple hearings in Denver last year where they talked about law enforcement not doing anything with gun control, that we wouldn't follow through on anything. Well, in some areas, they're correct. I mean, it's not right for us to step in and take people's personal property. And I think I and a lot of sheriffs see that too. And I can't speak to anyone else, but those are some of the issues we deal with on a daily basis. The problem with this is that on 003, they decided that they were going to move a lot of this under the sheriffs, which was going to be a huge financial burden on counties because county taxpayers were the ones to do that. But here's kind of the new direction that's being brought up. Since so many counties through the CCI, which is the Counties Incorporated, so all the counties decided to vote against 003, saying it was going to be a huge financial impact on all counties, which it was. Even my county was going to be about a $500,000 bill just to deal with this. So what they did was they came back and said, well, since the counties are fighting it and the sheriff is fighting it from different jurisdictions, that what they would then do is remove it from us so it takes away the burden, put it back on CPW so that they could say, well, there's not an impact on you now. Now we're all good to go, right? But here's the problem. CPW truly doesn't want this either. These are men and women that grew up in Colorado. Their whole function, their whole direction is to deal with protecting wildlife, dealing with hunting rights, hunting regulations, those types of things. They were never designed to be a firearm group that's supposed to deal with the taking firearms from folks or the dealing with having to give training for these things. You would have to almost triple the amount of money that's going to this organization. So somewhat the state said as well, we can self-fund it through all these fees that we can collect as a state now because it goes to what's called an enterprise fund and not through a normal state funding mechanism to go back to the general fund of the state, which then offsets your TABOR limits and all kinds of different things, then kick in. So it's really kind of then free money for the state to do whatever it would like with. I think that's extremely dangerous because they're going to have to upstaff by probably double to deal with this. It causes all kinds of grief for CPW because really their whole way they do business is about to shift if this law goes into place. So,
taking into account that Parks and Wildlife is supposed to be making sure that our natural beauty of this state is taken care of, you know, I mean, we don't want to have poachers, we don't want to have people destroying public lands. The fact that they would, with a straight face, take a conservation group that it is a government entity, but like you had spoken to, it's set up as an enterprise so it can self-fund itself through hunting and fishing licenses, that they would take this and twist it in such a way to be a gun control apparatus. That's heinous to me. I can't imagine, your average Colorado citizen, no matter where you stand politically, being okay with that manipulation of the language to try to skirt tax refunds through TABOR, to try to skirt having to have the citizens vote on something as sweeping as this gun control legislation. It's scary that this is even a consideration for the state. And I think that every legislator that signs their name to it is going to own every single potential negative outcome that's going to come out of this.
well, I think too on 003, it doesn't matter where they set it. If it gets signed in, I think that the Democratic side of the House is going to lose a lot of members in the next voting cycle. I think there's enough people even on the Democratic side that are very upset about this because, we grew up in Colorado. Colorado is a gun state, right? It's somewhere where we hunt, we fish, we do all those outdoor recreational pieces. And now all of a sudden you have a and I call it a Denver legislature because it's really not a Colorado legislature anymore. It's really run out of Denver. That party line vote now for something like this is probably going to really flag some recalls. We saw it in Pueblo a few years ago where I can't remember her name, but she was voted out right away. They did a recall on her for trying to push a gun legislation bill. So I think you're going to see it across the state. I think this is really an overreach. I think there's a severe problem with this. I love CPW. CPW is a great organization. We work with them on a daily basis here. We have moose and bear and just all kinds of wildlife in Teller County. It's a great place to hike and recreate, and CPW works well with us. But at the same token, taking away that ability for them to do what their job was really meant to be by Colorado statute and really with what they were doing, it's a big issue because it brings all kinds of problems back to their organization having to deal now with what we do. And it's making a new Colorado policing organization. I just talked about that as to what Colorado had in its constitution about Colorado policing organizations. That's why they did away with the Colorado Mounted Rangers having their own authority, like other range elements across the United States, and really Colorado State Patrol. So, it is a concern how things are changing.
Well, and we've already seen this happen once before, at least the attempt of it, where we wanted to reformulate Colorado Bureau of Investigations, we being the executive branch, in order to have them conduct all firearm type investigations throughout the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
That went downhill very quick because the fiscal note on that would have cost the state millions upon millions of dollars. And I would have to say the same thing with CPW. If they're saying that this is going to offset because of the fees that they're taking in, I think that's a lie. I think that narrative is a lie because you're going to have an increase in that governing agency in order to be able to handle the amount of business that's going to come in. I don't care how you structure that fees. The end result is, whatever that fee is going to be, they're wanting to hit the taxpayer on that. And an average law-abiding citizen who wants the right to be able to own and purchase a firearm without government interference, and all this is going to do is just create another huge fiscal note for the state. Already with the financial burdens that the state's suffering, they're just going to make it worse.
Well, the state's already identifying they're about $1.3 billion behind. They just don't have that money. So to create something that they believe fiscally they can run, but truly at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think for the amount of personnel they're going to have to hire nowadays, and really a law enforcement officer nowadays, it costs about $100,000 per with benefits, with how much you're paying them, with having to outfit them. You're about $160,000 a piece. Mm-hmm. Well, so you say 10 people, that's $1.6 million right there. They're going to need a whole lot more office staff. They're going to need, really, you're looking at something that's going to probably cost them 3.6 right off the top. And I'm not the greatest at math, but I will tell you this: on top of 1.3 billion, and then another 3.5 million on top of that, that's being supposedly going to be used for this. There's going to be some severe issues when it all hits home.
I have a lot of concerns about the way that the fiscal notes are coming out on these. When SB 3 was originally introduced, it carried a $0 fiscal note. It didn't account for having to examine any of these firearms if they were ever recovered. It didn't account for the enforcement aspects. It didn't account for any of those things. And most certainly didn't account for the fact that 85% or more of firearms sold in Colorado would have been banned outright by the original introduction of 03. At the middle of the night is when they came up with this scheme of, okay, we're gonna give you guys your stupid guns, but you're gonna pay all these licensing fees and go through all this rigmarole. I have some serious concerns about the fiscal note, about the estimations, and the purpose of this trade organization that we've started is so we can advocate in stakeholding, we can advocate as the expert witness, give testimony, whatever it may be, as to what the real effects financially, practically, logistically, whatever it may be, of this type of firearm legislation. And I'll call into account the anti-gun show bill that just got, I believe it is up for third reading in a couple days. I'd have to double check my calendar. Everything's kind of a mess. We've got a lot going on. But the gun show bill, they said that they had stakeholdered this with the people that matter in the industry. The promoter of the Tanner Gun Show never heard about it. The promoter of the Collector's Show never heard about it. So you're seeing stakeholders for this industry being Everytown or Giffords or other viciously anti-gun groups, zealots even.
Well, we find this with a lot of bills we deal with when they talk about stakeholders, even in the law enforcement bills. They've had no stakeholders. They'll tell us, oh, we've had stakeholders talk to us about this, but they can't identify who those stakeholders are. I think with a bill, they should have to identify who the stakeholders were at the table, to help them draft these bills or talk about these bills. Because what we're finding, a lot of times it's the ACLU or it's the gun group that really wants to get rid of guns totally. That's who's stakeholding these things. And that's not really representation of Colorado at a stakeholders meeting for a bill.
Well, and it's pretty clear to me in 158, with the sponsors of this particular bill, they put things here in the bill that identifies things that law enforcement needs to do as it relates to firearms and what we can keep, what we have to maintain. The problem is they clearly didn't talk to law enforcement because that's what we already do. That's what law enforcement does throughout the state in terms of weapons that are identified as evidence and need to be retained in order to conduct the investigation and any future prosecution. So clearly there was no conversation with law enforcement by any of these sponsors, and then just threw in more stuff into the bill to make it look good.
I can speak on that too. When it comes to the stakeholding aspect, when the bill was introduced, and I would encourage anybody who's got the time to do so to go back and listen to the audio testimony of this and find out when exactly the bill sponsor said that it was stakeholdered. I'm happy that I was there to witness this. So I had gone to the Capitol to testify in the support personally for the make it a felony to steal a handgun or a gun bill. And during that, I just happened to sit behind one of the police chiefs. And I was finishing up my notes to go testify against this bill as it was being introduced into the committee. And because Mr. Police Chief was sitting in front of me, I was like, hey man, what do you think of this? Have you seen this? And I showed it to him on my phone. They had no idea. So he ended up turning to his aide and said, what do we got on this? I don't know. It was flying so under the radar. The Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association, none of you guys knew about it. So, and he had gotten in the hallway prior to walking in to testify in the opposition clearance from the Sheriff's Association to speak out against it. So whatever stakeholding they're doing, it seems clandestine, cloak and dagger, the way that they're going about so many things in this current legislature. It's terrifying. I had no idea that I would be experiencing such drama when I started walking in there trying to represent the FFL Association and people in general.
Well, and it's not surprising that there's a huge effort and a huge amount of focus that deals directly with firearms, businesses associated with firearms, law enforcement in general. But yet when you look at things where you start seeing the decriminalization of crimes, the reduction in penalties, the reduction in classification, for things that you think there would be a little bit more precedent to either increase that fine or increase the time to be spent in prison or increase the level of felony, it's the reverse. The logic makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Sven brings up a good point. We are dealing with a bill tomorrow also for extreme indifference. So these bills are going after law-abiding citizens, really, that want to buy a firearm. The extreme difference bill that we are fighting tomorrow basically says they're dropping, if somebody drives by your home or a business and he fires rounds into the business, it used to be a class 2 felony because you could have killed someone. Well, what the state now is doing through this legislative bill is they're reducing the classification of the crime. So instead of being a class 2 felony, they're going to drop it to a class 5 felony because they didn't hit anybody.
They got lucky.
They got lucky, which flies in the face of all these types of bills that are saying, no one's really going to be lawful with firearms.
But if we talk about something like that on the extreme indifference, it used to be, and when they talk about how law enforcement is not enforcing gun laws, when they talk about that, it used to be the use of a deadly weapon was an aggravating circumstance, would actually intensify the level of felony of that particular crime committed. All they're doing now is saying the fact that you use the firearm, we're actually going to reduce the penalty or the level of felony because you didn't hit anybody.
Well, in law enforcement, we want, and we keep bringing forth bills that say we want to increase the criminal status of somebody that uses a firearm illegally or steals a firearm. Every single time in the last 2 years that we've attempted to bring a bill forward with that, it's been denied by the same legislature at the same time as introducing a bill to take away firearms from law-abiding citizens. So it's so strange to me to deal with these things. And then we dealt with the one last year where they want to make sure a lockable case is in every vehicle. But they take the law away that we push to say, hey, we want somebody that's stealing a firearm out of a vehicle to be raised to a Class 3 felony. Well, instead, they shot that bill down, and then we ended up with, well, the law-abiding citizen must hold their weapon inside of a lockbox, which a lockbox is easy to see in a vehicle, and it's much easier for somebody to identify there's a lockbox with a firearm in it, so I'm going to steal the lockbox.
And the problem that I have with that is it now puts the burden back on the victim of a crime. You have somebody that now the law says that if a firearm is stolen from you, you have X number of days to report it. Otherwise, you could suffer charges yourself. However, the suspect who actually stole the weapon isn't going to be charged with a felony for stealing that firearm. Makes no sense.
It doesn't, and I think it's incumbent upon the industry, it's incumbent upon elected officials, and it's incumbent upon the person that's buying the firearm or the citizen to fight for their rights. And I think that's for us. We want to get out the narrative of understanding with Sean, and we met with Ian Escalante also, and we're going to be doing more podcasts with multiple people to identify and get all of us on the same page, because I think that's the biggest thing, is knowing that we support you as citizens, you support us as organizations, and that really we're supporting the Second Amendment and the rights of people, because this goes far and beyond just even gun rights. We're dealing with it on water rights. We're dealing with it on all kinds of things, housing authorities, things that we normally wouldn't get involved in, but we're seeing on every day through a legislature that is really what I like to call a runaway train. It just is. It's just going, and they really don't understand the secondary effects, what it's doing to all Colorado citizens on both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter.
The third and fourth order effects of everything that's been happening in this legislature, in my opinion, is nothing short of hostile at this point. Yeah. Whether it's a road to hell that's paved on good intentions, or calculated indifference, or even malicious intent. I mean, they say don't attribute to ignorance or don't attribute to malice what you can to ignorance, but at some point it's like, how ignorant can you possibly be? And you're absolutely right. Right now there's a whole lot of people who are pretty upset about the way that this state has been run, about the way that these laws have been passed. I mean, I grew up in Denver, right? I grew up in Colorado. It was cowboy country, 15 years ago? Yeah. And then you had this massive shift, this massive change in the way that this state conducts things, that whether it's elections or the way that it handles its citizens or all of these different things. It's a huge litany of things that have come in and caused this legislature, this state, to go down this path. I do not recognize my state anymore. And I don't think that I'm the only one that feels this way. Honestly, I have to give them credit for pulling what they have, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you guys. You guys wouldn't be having this conversation with folks like Ian of RMGO or the other folks on your podcast. The thing that we need to really stress, I truly believe, and I think I'm speaking for everybody here, every person who lives in this state that's sick of what's happening needs to start paying better attention as to what it is. We're doing the best that we can as an industry to provide easily accessible resources for both the business and the individual to see what is happening at the legislature. The power that the individual has over their legislature, yeah, sure, you may feel, especially if you're in a super blue dog district, you're going to get dismissed, but if you get several hundred people at once, which isn't hard to get several hundred people to agree on the same thing, we've got a bunch of different folks, bunch of little factions. Getting everybody rowing in the same direction is ultimately what my goal is for the trade association on the business side of things. I think you guys as well, representing law enforcement. Rebecca Kelty won her district by 3 votes. 3 votes. And people tell me that their vote doesn't matter. It does.
It matters a lot. Yeah. And that's the thing, is on Senate Bill 25-158, if you get a chance to look at this bill, it's called a bill for an act concerning creating policies for state agencies in the treatment of certain items related to weapons, and in connection therewith, creating state procurement practices for firearms, ammunition, and firearms accessories, and requiring law enforcement agencies policies regarding the disposal and destruction of firearms. Take a look at this bill. It's pretty interesting, the stuff that they've hidden into it. If you don't and still don't know about it, SB 25003, that firearms bill alone has so many implications for your life if you're a firearms owner. Take a look at it. But don't dismiss the other fact of if you can get on to the state website and start looking up the bills that are coming forth, look at all the language in a lot of the different bills. They concern a lot of things for a lot of people throughout the state of Colorado. And really, I deal with it on a day-to-day basis with sheriffs that are Democrat, Republican. It doesn't matter who we are, we're all in the same direction with finding out that the legislative body in this state is really out of control when it comes to taking away the rights of law enforcement, citizens, and just all the different things that are happening in Colorado. We've gone from a state 10 years ago that was one of the lowest crime rates in the United States to where we are the third most violent state in the United States. You know, there's a lot of issues with these things, but really taking away the law enforcement's capability, taking away your citizens' right to protect themselves, and creating these huge fiscal notes for everything is causing Colorado to go into a crisis. And unfortunately, Coloradoans deal with crises almost every day you turn on the news now with so many issues surrounding politics. And I think we've got to get away from politics and get back to just being logical and common sense driven. So, Sean, I'd really thank you for coming in today and talking with I and Sven. Sven, as always, it's good to have you. And really, Teller County, we just want to get the word out to all of Colorado about what is happening. And we just want to thank you for all your support.
I'm going to tell everybody there is a rally that is happening at the Colorado State Capitol on the 11th. That's tomorrow. So if you want to know more about that, if you Google Second Syndicate, they're going to give you some good information on that. You can also check our website, the cffla.org. I'm going to make sure that before I leave here today, I'll probably do it in the parking lot, that there will be a notification as to how you can sign up to go participate in that rally. And if you haven't, sign up to testify on 003. That is being heard tomorrow until adjournment. If we can get as many people as we can to testify remotely on that, maybe we'll be able to send them the effective message that, hey, we don't want this. And the information on how to do that, I'll make sure is on our website, and I'll make sure that you have that as well to tag on the video.
Absolutely. Sean, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you coming in. Sven, as always, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Teller County, for allowing us to come in ahead of you or come before you and talk to you about all these issues. I think it's good that we get out the narrative that we see also instead of the negative narrative that you're getting from Denver. So thank you very much for all that you've done for us, Colorado, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you and have a great day.
If you wish to testify against Senate Bill 25-003 tomorrow, visit leg.colorado.gov/testimony to sign up.